Bexley Patriarch, made in Ohio.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is that you are joining me for this video. Thank you for clicking on the video. Thank you for joining me yet again. First off, I want to just throw out a big thanks to everybody who commented on my last couple of videos regarding the Medici. There was a lot of insight and input given to me, and I do appreciate respectfully disagreeing, agreeing, whatever it may be. Much appreciated. Now, the subject of today's video is going to be the Bexley Patriarch Emerald Green Fountain Pen. Very nice pen. I'm going to get into the neutral zone, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before I do that, I do want to give you some background information on the pen. All right, starting off with the Bexley Company, founded in 1993. They were a bunch of dudes who were beasts at helping out and fixing vintage pens. They love vintage style pens until they just got into saying to themselves, hey, you know what, let's just pump these suckers out ourselves, bang them out and sell them. They have done so since then and have produced high quality products in the form of fountain pens. They use different resins and acrylics, all machined and then hand turned for polishing. The polishing work is fantastic. It's all done in Columbus, Ohio. The Bexley Pen Company produces several different filling mechanisms that we are all familiar with, such as the piston filler or cartridge converter. You also have your eyedrop convertible pens. Now, onto the neutral zone. That which is neither good nor bad, or could be good or bad, depending on you. Let me start off with just the nib. This pen uses a number 6 Jowo nib. Looks very similar to your standard Edison steel nibs, just different branding. The feed is one of your standard cheapy plastic feeds that you see in Jinhao pens, Conklin pens, Monteverde pens. They're of pretty standard usage nowadays. They don't seem to have a problem. They always seem to supply good ink flow and no ink starvation issues. So why the hell not, right? This pen is green. It is called the Emerald Flake. They have 4 other flavors that you can choose from. Those would be agate. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, please feel free to advise me in the comments using phonetic spelling. The agate color is similar to that of the bedrock flake you would see in Edison Beaumont pens. They also have turquoise. It's a blue pen that is also similar to the sapphire flake in the Beaumont series. And finally, garnet. This one is like the Bordeaux flake in the Edison series. Now all the colors, all the flavors that I just said, they are all in flaked material. This one in particular is green. I do compare it to Edison, however, be advised, Bexley came first, so if there's any inspiration taken from one or the other, it would be Edison from Bexley, if at all. And it is similar to our Conklin Durograph Forest Green. The Forest Green has a little bit of a darker look to it. I'm going to put them next to each other so you can see. This one here is the Conklin Durograph Forest Green. This one here is the Emerald Green Bexley Patriarch. Okay, I know that the camera might make it look significantly different, but in hand they look very similar. Other than, of course, the furniture on this one is white metal and the furniture on this one is yellow metal. Finial is black, as is the end finial, as is the base of the cap underneath the center band, as well as our grip section. Grip section is also black. Okay. Comes in this navy blue box with printed information reading Bexley Pen Company Incorporated Patriarch Collection 7903 green. And mine's a fine, therefore they circled fine. It is also made right here in the United States of America. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pop this sucker open so you can see what came inside the box besides the pen. Now, what came inside the box is this pretend leather clamshell style box with a bedding inside where you can pull this off. On the inside there was this folded piece of paper. It is missing a third of it, and that is pretty much a form that I filled out and sent into Bexley. This entitles you to a lifetime warranty. Okay, now moving on to the good, the bad, and the ugly. Starting off with the good, I like to start off with our nib. Our nib, like I said before, is a standard number 6 Yovo nib. Mine is a fine and it's made in steel. And since it is a Yovo nib, what you find is that it feels as good as any pen that uses your Yovo nibs. And it has a very smooth feel, writes very well. It has satisfying feedback, much like the feedback one would experience if they took like a damp, wet, porous sponge in the hourglass shape. Remember when you were in school, or if you're still in school, you know what I'm talking about, and you were wiping down a chalkboard. It's got that feedback. I particularly like that kind of feedback. You may not. Preference aside, the nib writes very well. No skipping issues, no hard starts, no ink starvation, nothing bad about the nib. Steel nib, minimal line variation, it is made of steel. This pen is all turned acrylic, including the black accents on the pen. Okay, now at first I thought maybe there's a potential that there would be some kind of injection molding to cut corners. I don't believe there is, because if you look at all the threads on the pen, none of it have a seams or evidence of injection molding. The pen overall has very minimal branding. The only branding that you will see on this pen is at the top of the clip, where there is a B, as well as on the nib, which it says Bexley in nice, what looks like Spencerian script, maybe, possibly. Other than that, there is no other branding. The assembly on this pen is very seamless. What I mean is where the finial meets the cap, where the end finial meets the body, is almost imperceptible with your fingers. You can rub it all day long and you'll feel nothing. There's no seam, nothing to catch. It's very smooth. Very good craftsmanship regarding seams. This finish is polished to a glass-like shine. I like it. The green emerald fleck material has a lot of depth, variation in color. I love the inconsistent pattern of the flecked material. The clip itself is sturdy. The pen as a whole, very sturdy, despite it being very light in the hand. I found that the threads throughout the entire pen are very finely machined, very finely done. As you would see in, for example, an Edison pen. Everybody talks about how well the threads are in that. This one is no different, with the exception of the capping of the pen. But with everything else, when you unscrew the body from the grip section, very smooth, very finely threaded threads. I found that this pen, even though it's a cartridge converter pen, I found that it is easily convertible into an eyedropper pen, even though it has a bottom finial. All you'd have to do is put some silicone grease around the rim and then screw it on, make sure it's nice and snug, and I've eyedropper converted this without any problems. Now that is merely anecdotal experience. If you have a different experience, this may not be across the board, but for this one and for what I have been doing, it has been very reliable when it came to eyedropping. Overall, this is a very nice pen, very well made. I love how it writes, but I do have to move on to the bad. Moving on to the bad, let's talk coin. The MSRP of this pen, as per Bexley, is $239. Some retailers charge between $180 to $195. That's a reasonable price. However, consider the cost of a production line Edison fountain pen. And we got the Collier, we got the Beaumont, you got the Pearlette. Now, those pens are $149. They share virtually all the same qualities of this pen, such as very fine threads, Yovo number 6 nib, cartridge converter, and eyedropper convertible, all made from hand-turned acrylic, polished to a glass-like sheen. Now, for $180 to $185, does it justify the price? That's up to you. In my case, I don't particularly believe so. Having said that, I did pay for it and buy it, and I do love it, and I do love how it writes. However, there is alternatives. Such alternatives would be, if you consider it against what I showed you before, the Conklin Durograph. They're both green flecked pens. The Conklin Durograph costs a third of the Bexley. And yes, the Conklin Durograph does have more of a production, mass-produced feel to it. However, and I'm going to get to this in the ugly, there are issues about the Bexley that might be an isolated incident with my pen, and it might not be with every pen, but I do have to say it does make the price exceed the value when you have something like the Conklin Durograph. Just a quick comparison, the differences between the Conklin Durograph and the Bexley are as follows. They're both cartridge convertible. They're both green flecked. In contrast, the Conklin Durograph has steel colored furniture, whereas the Bexley has gold colored furniture. The Conklin is not eyedrop convertible due to the threads of the grip section being made of metal. I think for significantly less money, approximately $60 to $65, $70, you can get yourself a Conklin Durograph. If you like how the Bexley writes, you can always swap out the nib with a Edison nib, Goulet nib, or even a Bexley nib, and you'll have the same writing experience. Now, I want to move on to the ugly. There is not so much ugly, only a few things, okay? 3 things to be exact. And it all involves the cap. Now, when capping this pen, what I find is there's always times where it either just closes nice and snug, secure, you rotate it and it comes to a stop and it's secure, okay? And that can be done in almost 2 rotations. Sometimes when you go to close it, it'll either come to a nice snug stop or it'll come to a slower stop and continue to close and rotate a little more than it did the first couple of times. And it's always a mix. It's always either it closes securely and comes to a secure, satisfying stop, or it'll keep going just a little bit more, almost like it was really greasy on the inside, which it's not. And it's a phenomenon that I can't seem to figure out why it's doing that. I can't figure out if it's me or if it's not me. I don't know. Second thing is cross-threading does and always seems to happen. You have to be very careful about how you screw this in, because if you don't screw it in perfectly straight, it's going to cross-thread and get stuck. So in order to mitigate that, you have to put it in, go in the reverse direction, wait for it to click, and then start to screw it in. Doing that every single time and having to remember that every single time can be a little bit of a pain, but every single time you do forget, you're reminded by the fact that you didn't put it in perfectly straight and it kind of gets jammed up, okay? And then lastly, this one is a little bit annoying. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the camera, but if you look carefully, just right above where the center band is, you have discoloration from the cap assembly. The cap assembly has threads, and what ends up happening is moisture gets caught in those threads, diluted ink or evaporated ink from temper differential or changes of barometric pressure where the ink does expel out a little bit at a time through the nib and feed gets caught in there, and there's no way to clean it. I've tried to disassemble it, won't happen, no dice. I've tried to clean it using an ultrasonic cleaner, again, no dice. So now you have this discoloration in the threads of the cap assembly that you are stuck with. I don't particularly love it, but it does get annoying, but it is what it is. The pen writes fantastically, and I do like the pen. Alrighty now, decision-making time. Should you pull the trigger, or should you holster up and identify a better target? In my honest opinion, for $180 with the flaws and the ugly aspects that I talked about, I would say hold your fire, wait for a better target. You can get the same writing experience and comparable quality with a Conklin Durograph set with, say, an Edison, Goulet, or even a Bexley nib. The only difference is you won't have to deal with discoloration in the cap threads and the cap assembly. You don't have to deal with inconsistent number of turns to cap it and uncap it, because sometimes it goes further and sometimes it comes to a secure, snug stop. And you don't also have to deal with the cross threading that I mentioned before, which can be annoying. If most of your pens don't require a counter turn to make sure that the threads don't cross, and then you go to turn this one, you're actually potentially damaging the threads over time, making it less secure each time they cross the thread. That's not something I want to worry about. With the Conklin, I don't have to worry about that at all. Every time I put it in, it's very snug. The threads are finely machined. So that's why I say at this point in time, I would most likely shoot for something else like the Conklin Durograph. Replace the nib if you want the experience of writing that the Bexley offers. Or if you wanted to go something within the similar price range of the Bexley Patriarch, I would say go with an Edison. They are very well crafted pens that have all the benefits but none of the negatives that I've experienced with the Bexley. Now, having said that, the Bexley pens are fantastic. They're beautiful. I love the way they write, but the ugly aspects about it bother me enough. Once again, thanks for joining me. I hope this helped. I hope this helps you if you ever had a question about whether you should get one, and I hope this helps you make a decision on purchasing or not purchasing one. Be good.